Are the Fever finally finding some consistency? Well, dang, our two role players and Sophie Cunningham and Natasha Howard trying to help. Plus, they have a new player coming into town. The standings are dramatically taking shape. And pressers after the Fever beat the Aces. You'll get it all today on Locked On Women's Basketball's Friday Fever Report.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Fever Fridays, as it's the Locked On Women's Basketball Fever Report Day this week. I'm Tony East. I've covered the Fever since the Wubble in 2020 for the Next and Forbes, the IX. And today, we're talking Indiana Fever, of course, who last night came off a nice win over the Aces, in which their available stars were not that effective, but two very important recent pieces, and Sophie Cunningham and Natasha Howard were awesome. And I want to talk about them and why they, I think, are a beacon of hope in some ways for the Fever right now. Then we'll talk about new stuff, big standings updates for the Fever with their win. Chloe Bibby coming to town from, I guess, technically you could say the Valkyries, but was a free agent. And then pressers. You'll hear from Stephanie White, Sophie Cunningham, and Natasha Howard at the end about their win over the Aces last night. I was already planning to talk about what I was going to talk about in this first segment before last night's game even happened. And I got very fortunate for the topical nature of what I'm going to say, that the game went the way it did. And that is something I have talked a lot on this iteration of Locked On Women's Basketball, the Friday Fever shows, about consistency and why the start-stop nature of the Fever season has held them back from consistency. In some ways they could try to work on it, and some signs for optimism. If they can find that consistency, they'll in fact be pretty good. And that might never happen, right? They're hurt. Caitlin Clark's still hurt. She's going to miss time even more with this groin injury. You know, now we'll find out when the return is, but we'll get no updates until there's an update. And so they're going to be missing her. And when she returns, she might have missed half or more of their games this season. And the same discussions about her, injuries this season will still be an issue with their consistency. However, they had those few games before the break where she was back and they looked a little bit better, right? Okay, there's some juice. Beating the Aces. They should have beat the Sparks. They beat Dallas, right? They were pushing on the door of a nice close to the break, beat Dallas, win in Connecticut, beat Atlanta, and then Caitlin gets hurt. So they were on the precipice of consistency, and they didn't quite get it, and now they'll have to figure things out without Caitlin. You'll hear Sophie Cunningham talk about that in the third segment here. But what I was going to talk about in this very segment was one potential reason that I would, if I'm the Fever, be gripping to some man, if we get healthy, we're about to go, is two role players are balling. And they're the two you're going to hear from in the third segment, and that's Sophie Cunningham and Natasha Howard. They just beat the Aces. The Aces are not awesome this season. They're a 500 team. But the Fever beat them last night, and they beat them with Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell being very pedestrian. I believe those two started combined 5 for 18 from the field. They have lofty standards, right? Kelsey Mitchell just had 21 points and 4 assists, and they won her minutes by 16. That's really good, right? She's a good player. She has really high standards. But it took her 24 shots to get there, right? She was 5 for 15 on twos. That's tough. Aaliyah Boston, frustrated very obviously throughout the game, goes 5 for 17 on twos. Great finisher this season, didn't have in this game. She had 13 and 10, and what I would consider a bad game for her, she would too. Mitchell and Boston, who are the two stars that are the reason the Fever can win as often as they do without Clark, they're very good, were both poor, right? They're playing an Aces team that was hungry, and after a poor start with hockey subs, was fired up, and it was a huge game with tiebreaker implications on the line. The Fever needed a way to win it, and the two players who are going to be all you're going to hear about for the next 5 minutes that carried them were Sophie Cunningham and Natasha Howard. Not to diminish the play of anybody else who played very well. Basically, everybody else besides Lexi Hall was efficient, at least in some ways. Natasha Howard, with baller defense, was great against a strong-ish front court team. Gustafson's playing. Stokes is playing, albeit not very often. Of course, Asia Wilson is out there, and Alyssa Smith is double-doubling, right? A great front court for Vegas. Natasha Howard's defending all those players at some point in the game and goes 6 for 9 from the field and gets to the charity stripe for half of the Fever's free throw attempts in this game. She took 7 of their 14 and had 5 offensive boards, 18 points, 13 rebounds, 3 steals, 0 turnovers, and great defense. Among, if not the best, Natasha Howard games this season. Her last 3 quarters were excellent against Minnesota in the Commissioner's Cup title game, obviously, in a game she started very slow. But this was just lights out two-way play from Howard, who after the game discussed the importance of defense leading to offense. Sophie Cunningham in this game had 15 points on 5 shot attempts. 4 for 5 from the field, made her only 2 and went 3 of 4 from deep, made all 4 of her foul shots. Also pesky annoying on defense with a steal and 3 boards. They win her minutes by 7 points. 10 for 14 were those two on their way to 33 points, 16 rebounds combined. The Fever won a game against a good team that they had a very important standings match against because of those two. And I was already going to talk about them because entering that game, they were already playing well. So let's do some stats. Last 5 games for Natasha Howard. July 13th, they play Dallas. From that game through now, she's played 5 games. Howard is shooting 64% in those games, nearly 10% above her season average, 15 points a game, almost 8 rebounds a game, 2 steals on that efficiency. She has been hooping. Some of that is improved connection, high-low stuff with Aaliyah Boston, leading to more spacing. Some of that is more role coming with Clark hurt, leading to more shot attempts, and she's converted them, which is why she looks so good. I think her defense has been better of late. Really, really huge play from Howard. When they've needed her to be exceptional, she has been, right? That has been one reason the Fever have stayed afloat, been able to get and bank as many wins as they have this season, despite the stop-start nature of their season. Sophie Cunningham, who all year has kind of been dealing with injuries and recovering, and kind of very recently hinted at, I can't remember exactly her phrasing, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but basically suggested, like, yes, I'm finally like healing and playing enough games in a row to be getting like my feet under me and be consistent. And that's clearly shown up in her play. Obviously, it's a rigged start here because I'm picking the Atlanta game where she had a double-double with 16 and 10. So, of course, her stats are a little inflated. But including that game, the last 6 Sophie Cunningham games, she is averaging 13.7 points a game, nearly double her season average, 61% from the field, about 16% over her season average, 58% from 3 is insane, 5 boards a night above her average. She has also been balling of late. Maybe unsustainably hot shooting from Sophie Cunningham. Howard 64% is probably a little rosy for like a full season projection of her efficiency. But something huge for the Fever is that those two are finding some footing beyond just like a slightly expanded role. Cunningham is starting now. I don't know if that's going to continue when Clark returns, but I think her starting with McDonald certainly makes sense. It gives them a little more ball handling and maybe should continue when Clark comes back. I think Hall is a better shooter and defender than Cunningham. I think Sophie's better at just about everything else. So if you're the Fever and you're searching for consistency all season, and you know you have star-level players, you have 3 All-Stars on your team, you just need some of your role players to give you something solid every night. That is where the optimism should come from for the Fever after this Aces win. And after the way those two have been playing for now, decently sized samples, right? 5 or 6, almost a quarter of their season of their games, or a fifth of their season, whatever you want to say. If they can carry that into a healthy Clark environment, if both Howard and Cunningham could do so, then the Fever would really have 5 players like night in, night out, know what you're getting, fit the team profile, can score, can guard, level stuff. Plus Hall is obviously a terrific defender. They've just had so much, and this is true of their stars too, up and down play from everybody. It's been hard for me to figure out the inconsistency because it happens with different players on the floor at different times of every game. But I think this would be their hope right now, is that the surge those two are currently going through can be something that holds and sticks when Clark is back and the team is healthy. They've been great, and the Fever have been hanging in there as a result, still clinging to their over 500 record. We got to talk a little bit about the standings. It's a little premature to look at this, but not really, with less than 20 games to go. Why their win over the Aces was so huge. Another key thing that happened that impacts the playoff race in the WNBA this week and certainly helps the Fever And of course, we got to talk about Chloe Bibby, the new Fever forward. So much coming up here on the Fever Report version of Locked On Women's Basketball. But before we do any of that, we got to talk about game time. Have you ever decided the last minute to head to the ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. It makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices in the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. I used Game Time to get tickets to a Liberty versus Wings game 2 years ago. It was awesome. Got it day of. The seat views in the app are awesome, exactly spot on with the Barclays Center. They're a low price guarantee, made me feel like I was getting the best deal. No hidden fees, so the price I saw was the price I paid. It's the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, and you can browse the app for exciting upcoming baseball games this summer. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on Locked On Women's Basketball, the Fever Report version every single Friday / maybe Saturday morning / maybe Thursday night, depending on when the Fever play and when I'm available. Talking all things Indiana Fever, who are back over 500 at 13-12 after beating the Las Vegas Aces last night for me talking, and hopefully last night by the time I actually click publish on this thing. A big win in that any win is big for a 500 team hoping to make the playoffs. That's what it was for the Fever. Also a big win for the Fever because they and the Aces had split the season series entering that game. The Aces won in Las Vegas. The Fever won in Indy. And so that game was to decide the season tiebreaker. The winner would be ahead in the standings. And that's a huge deal right now. They are so close in the standings chase right now. The Fever now are 13-12. The Aces are 12-12. So that put the Fever in 6th place in the standings. If those two teams, the Aces and Fever, finish into two-way tie, the Fever would get the better seed. And so that was a huge win, both because it knocked a team right around the Fever down and because, of course, it pushed the Fever up and it gave them a tiebreaker. Just a huge win, and Cunningham and Howard were a big part of it. And maybe it's a little premature to do this, but currently the 6, 7, 8, 9 seeds in the standings, and remember, top 8 make the playoffs. The Fever need to finish inside that top 8. There's only 1.5 games separating the Fever at 6 and the Valkyries at 9. That's the same gap as the Fever and the 5th place Dream. It's totally possible the Fever could, with some consistent play like that or a strong close like last year, sneak into this 3 through 5 range. The Mercury, the Storm, and the Dream are not that far ahead of them in the standings. We'll talk a little bit about the schedule in a second. But I think the key group right now for the Fever to focus on is, one, getting into the field of the postseason. And those 3 teams that they're all within a game and a half of, 6 through 9, are the Aces, who are 12-12, huge win by the Fever. The Mystics at 11-12, so just the same number of losses to the Fever. And the Valkyries at 10-12, all the same number of losses for those teams. And suddenly here come the Sparks, who've won 4 games in a row. We'll see if that's real or not. But to me, the Fever need to finish obviously ahead of one of those teams to make the field. Those are the teams to keep an eye on if you want to see some playoff basketball for a Fever team that almost certainly will be peaking late this season, just given the injuries that they had, or at least like be close to their best late in the year. So a big one over the Aces for that. The other key standings thing that happened this week, I believe this came out early Friday, Kayla Thornton, all-star, the best player for Golden State this season, is out for the season. She got hurt in practice. She needed surgery. She's done. And so that should, never a guarantee, make the Valkyrie worse. Can the Valkyries catch the Fever without Kayla Thornton? I would guess not. So that does help the Fever likely be a top 8 team, almost certainly. The Sparks might be a threat as well. We'll see if this, again, 4-game win streak is real. But I think the Fever, between some role player growth and consistency and the Valkyries falling out and getting the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Aces, have to feel pretty good about their playoff chances. And they need to focus on getting the best seed possible. If they could avoid Minnesota or New York in the first round, they'll feel at least decent. We'll see where Phoenix ends up landing. They play so many rookies that have never played on that stage. But if you can get 6 seed or higher as the Fever, you at least feel like you have a chance to win in a first-round series. And depending on how well they're playing, perhaps even more than that. But the other thing to point out is the Fever have the 6th hardest remaining schedule. The Aces have the 5th hardest remaining schedule. But all 3 of Washington both of Washington and Golden State have much easier schedules than the Fever. The Sparks have a tougher schedule than the Fever. So the Fever right in the middle of those 5 teams. Atlanta schedule, the second easiest the rest of the way. Phoenix is the absolute easiest. So if you want to circle a team for the Fever to try to catch, to maybe get into that 4 or 5, it would be Seattle. And I would have probably said that without looking at the schedules. But I think for the Fever, if they're looking up, they want to catch the Storm and maybe try to play Atlanta or Seattle in the first round. If they're looking down, I think they'll be looking at Golden State potentially falling off in a hard schedule, being tricky for the Sparks. The schedule, the standings, the tiebreakers, they're all kind of coming into focus. It's a little early for this, but last night's game was so significant, I wanted to provide an update on why I think the Fever are trending well for the postseason, despite barely being over 500. They also have a new player. They finally filled their 12th and final roster spot. I've been getting a lot of questions about that. I kind of had to shrug, right? The guarantee deadline came and went. Everybody asked why they didn't waive Bree Turner. I would ask, why would they waive Bree Turner? The answer for many is, well, she doesn't play. Yeah, it's not like all players do. There's much more intangibles to being on a basketball team than actually playing in games, first and foremost. Second off, they had an open roster spot anyway. They had no real cap reason to just cut Bree Turner. I didn't really understand the why. If you want someone else to play, that's fine. Just sign that player. There's no, I mean, obviously, if they want to sign 2 players, sure, that's one thing. But the other question people had that I thought was fair was adding a 12th player. They had that roster spot for a long time. When they were healthy, who cares? Like, that 12th player is probably not going to play. Keep your cap open as long as possible. Maybe a trade materializes. Maybe you could sign someone else. But now, I wondered post All-Star break, and really it started before that, but I wondered when 7-day contracts became available, if the Fever would jump on that with their 12th spot, especially when players have been getting hurt. But they certainly need front court depth once Bonner left. And they finally did it. Chloe Bibby in the door. She played for Golden State earlier this season for 5 games. Her best game this season was against the Fever. Ironically, she had 12 points and 3 boards in that game on 4 for 9 from the field, plus 25. On the season, she is plus 22. Plus 25 of that came in one game, right? Her best game against the Fever, 6.4 points per game, 2.8 boards. It's a small sample of 5 games. It's only a 7-day deal. So only for the Fever will last, I believe, their next 2 games against Chicago and Phoenix. We'll see what kind of minutes she gets. We've seen the Fever be tinkering and deciding with these front court spots, right? Sometimes Timpson's playing. Sometimes Dantas is playing. Turner very rarely plays. Obviously, Boston and Howard get their run. But in college, which maybe graduated a while ago, her last season at Maryland was 2021-22. She was kind of a do-it-all front court player, right? Decent shooter, 35% in college on 550 attempts, 12.5 points a game in her 2 seasons at Maryland. Like a decent enough player who deserved her chance with Golden State this year. And it's front court depth the Fever need, right? They've been trying to balance the youngsters and their vets in these front court spots the whole time. Since Bonner, they've been getting by with Cunningham back after being injured for so much time, and Dantas is back from America. They have enough front court players, but that is certainly where I think they needed the depth the most, especially after bringing in McDonald to fill the spot of Clark's injury. So I totally get why they brought him forward. I've only watched Bibby play against the Fever. I didn't watch any of the other 4 Golden State games she played in, and I don't watch hardly any college basketball besides my Hoosiers. So I don't know a ton about like her specific skill set, what exactly she's going to bring to the Fever, but I'd project she's kind of just depth in the front court. I kind of doubt she'll play unless there's an injury to another front court player. I would still imagine it's Boston Howard starting and playing big minutes, and then Dantas and Timpson, and I guess at times Turner filling in the other moments. But there's the depth. A 7-day deal. She could sign 3 7-day deals with the Fever this season. Another 7-day deal right after her first one would take her right up to the trade deadline in early August, which is another date to keep an eye on when it comes to the Fever's roster spots, although trades in the WNBA are very hard with the way the salary cap rules are structured. Not impossible, but very challenging. So we'll see what kind of impact Bibby can have. A trial run for the Fever for 7 days. Having a full team makes all the sense in the world, as opposed to not having a full team. That was something I was curious about. Why hadn't they signed a 12th player? Now they did. But again, to go back to it, like waiving Turner would have just opened space. If they think they could have signed someone with that space who would be playing for them every night, maybe, but who is that player? Like if they were good enough to play every game besides like Emma Meesman, who's about to be back, they'd be on a team. So their roster's full now. Their roster makes sense to me. We'll see what Bibby can do. We'll see if the Fever opt to keep her or not. Maybe they opt to wait till the trade deadline is done. They have a road trip coming up before that. Lots of eval time coming. Let's hear from people who know much more about basketball than I will ever know in my entire life. They forget more about basketball than I'll ever know. Sophie Cunningham, Natasha Howard, and Stephanie White spoke after the Fever win over the Aces last night. Let's just hear from them to close out this Fever Report episode of Locked On Women's Basketball. Back here on Locked On Women's Basketball on Fever Report this Friday. I'm Tony East. I've covered the Fever for years. The Fever won 80-70 over the Aces. Sluggish second quarter. They closed parts of the first half poorly, but I thought the key parts of the game where they found some zip and consistency on offense. The coach explains why, and Stephanie White, some players answered my questions about it and talked about so much more. You've heard enough from me. Let's hear from them.
For either of you, tonight you guys, you get to 80, shoot well from three, creating open shots. How much can you tell when a game starts or in the course of a game that your offense is more fluid on a particular night, and how long does that last?
Well, first of all, starting off with our defense. Our defense get our offense going, and that's how we maintain games like that. We don't rely on our offense a lot. We rely on our defense to get our defense. When our defense is going, our offense is going. So we limited Vegas to one shot, and that's how we got open shots for the shooters inside the paint and everything.
I know your coach was talking right after you guys got back from the break about not letting runs get out of control, keeping things, manageable. How much is defense a part of that, specifically to what you guys have dealt with this season?
Defense is very important. To be able to stop runs like that, we got to play defense, and I feel like we did a good job tonight on stopping Vegas runs, and we didn't get rattled up or anything like that. We were like, okay, they got their run, now it's our turn to get our run, and that's what we did.
For either of you, before the game, Coach said that it's kind of like been up and down a lot, thinking, is Caitlin going to play, is she not going to play? And now it's just a feeling of go ahead and charge forward. How does that affect your thinking at this point? And how smoothly do you think you guys adapted to that approach?
Yeah, I don't think that it affects us anymore. We put out a statement today that she's day to day, and so we know that as a team, and so that's helpful to mentally prepare. But I really do think that if we have Caitlin, great, and we know how to play with her. If we don't have Caitlin, great, we know how to play without her, and I think that's just so important. It gives people confidence that when she is back, they know their role, and then when she's not, they have the confidence to come out there and make big plays for us. And so for us, I don't really think it's something that we think about anymore. For us, it's taking one day at a time, stacking the days. And tonight, I think we did a really good job, not only physically, but seriously mentally, because we have been struggling and inconsistent when they go on runs, and we stopped it, and then we went on our runs. And so that's a big step for us. And I just said it, but it's all about consistency from here on out.
Chloe? No. Let's go.
Natasha, what was working, did you feel like, for you in particular, but also in that second half, it seemed like the ball when you guys weren't turning it over nearly as much, you guys were settling in. What contributed to that in your mind?
First of all, you're taking care of the ball. We only had, 3 turnovers in the second half. For me, I just took advantage on the defense and who was guarding me and stuff. I just went out there and just played my game, and also just contributing to my teammates, and my teammates contributing back to me as well. But it was just like I said before, it was just our defense. Me, it was just my defense, and it helped me out on the offensive end.
So where'd the jacket come from?
I think it came from Nike. Shout out to Nike, thank you. It was nice.
Your players were just talking about how they felt like the offense fluidity that they found today came from the defensive end of the stops they got on the end of the floor. And I know you've talked about slowing down runs. How much do you feel like those two things came in tandem today and led you to this win?
Yeah, they did in the second half. I didn't feel like we did that in the first half to end quarters in particular. But our defense can't be dictated by our offense. It has to be the other way around. We had some lapses in the first quarter. We had some lapses into the second. And we can't have those. We've got to maintain elite execution on both ends. I thought the second half the ball moved better. Look, there's no defense for turnovers that lead to scores. And I think they had 13 points off of turnovers in the first half. We did a much better job of taking care of the ball, and that's our first line of defense, and we did a much better job of that in the second.
Kelsey tonight, not the most efficient night, but still an impactful night, and that, especially in that fourth quarter. Is there any kind of message you need to say to her? Anything that we still need you to keep shooting and keep going, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just telling her, let it fly. It's gonna go. And then helping her recalibrate when she's attacking the rim and just staying on balance.
I thought there are times where she's taken a lot of contact, and she gets off balance and she goes off of one leg instead of off two, and just really reiterate to her, particularly in those moments, go off of 2 feet, stay balanced, go strong to the rim. That's when she makes her best reads and her best decisions, and then to keep shooting it from outside. She made some big ones when we needed them.
Oh, Scott, I'm Chloe.
Steph, what stood out to you about the point of attack defense for you guys individually? It seemed like everyone kind of, the best they could, owned their matchup and made things, like you were saying, very difficult, especially there late in the game.
Yeah, they're a tough team to defend. Jackie Young is one of the best one-on-one players. Obviously, Asia and what she brings to the table. Jewel as well. And Dana Evans is fast and gets downhill. And we really challenge their pride, their individual defensive pride. You got to guard your yard. You got to guard your matchup. We got to guard 2 with 2 in the pick and roll. We've got to do a better job of locking into that consistently. And I felt like individually, for the most part, we held true to that. There were still some breakdowns for various reasons, but I thought we did a much better job, and we got better tonight.
Yeah, I know you've talked a lot about consistency, stacking days. Just what do you guys need to do these next couple days leading into Chicago to keep that consistency?
We have to just understand the urgency and attention to detail that it takes. We don't have the luxury of having breakdowns, of having lapses. We have to understand the sense of urgency that it takes with each possession. One possession can change a ballgame, and we got to understand and value that. And also, we played some heavy minutes tonight, and the challenge is, if you're tired, you got to ask for a sub, right? If you're tired, you got to ask for a sub, and then our bench has to be ready. I felt like our bench in the second half was really good defensively. In the first half, I didn't feel that way. You got to be ready to come in, and you got to be ready to guard your matchup and execute the game plan. We have depth for a reason. We've got quality depth, and we've got to be able to use it. So if fatigue is a factor in execution, then they just need to ask for a sub, and I'll get them out and get them back in.
We've talked about already a couple times this season already, but what's it say about the confidence she has, confidence that you guys have in her to knock down that big shot at the end of the game?
Yeah, Ari's been big for us. She really has, and I really challenged her in that second half, in that fourth quarter, to be the floor general that we needed, to set the tone, not just offensively but defensively. We were in incorrect pick and roll coverage one possession, and that's a point guard's responsibility when they're on the floor to make sure that we're in that. And she takes ownership of that. And I felt like in that moment, and she struggled shooting the ball in the last game against New York, and she was in there after practice getting extra shots yesterday. So she's putting in the work. She understands momentum. She understands timing. She understands the flow of the game. And that was just a big shot. And she shot it with confidence. There was no hesitation. And that's what I want to see.
When it comes to the momentum swings and getting too high, too low, and allowing things to snowball, I guess, just as a coach, is there anything you can do to try and stifle that or control that, or is that something that the players, that it's already up to the players to kind of sort through and figure out themselves?
Yeah, coaches, we can't control that. We can't control anything like that. The biggest thing is just reiterate to them to stay neutral. Reiterate that this is a game of runs. We've got to shorten theirs and we've got to extend ours. To encourage when we need encouragement and to get in them when we need to get in them. And that's just learning to have a feel for those moments. And I felt like we did a better job tonight of when we needed to get stuck. I didn't feel like that at that stretch into the early second quarter. Didn't feel like that, but we regrouped, and I felt like we did a much better job in the second half, and we grew. We got better.
And thank you all for tuning in today to Locked On Women's Basketball's Fever Report. We'll be back next week with whatever's going on, maybe an update on Caitlin Clark should one be provided. They play Chicago Sunday and Phoenix on Wednesday. I believe there are only 2 games in the interim. I will be there for both of those. Thank you guys for checking in today. You could find me on social media at Tony R. East and my stories about the Fever in the Next / the IX. We will see you tomorrow with more on Locked On Women's Basketball.